There are many strange happenings in the wild country of British Columbia, and none more so than the singular event of coming into contact with a Sasquatch. In the indigenous tongue of a native people, the males are known as the Bukwas, and the females are named Sanakwa. The people who seek them out are known as Sasquatch researchers, and the following reports are from the files of one such man, Canada's preeminent Sasquatch researcher and seeker of the truth, Thomas Steenburg. This report is called Incidents at the Bighorn Dam. It was early in the afternoon of January 25, 1988, when the phone rang at the Calgary, Alberta home of Thomas Steenburg. The caller was one Deborah Malone, who was also a resident of Calgary. She had a tale to tell, one that she had kept to herself for 16 years. But after reading an ad which Thomas had placed in a local newspaper, she realized that the time had now come for her to speak about something that she had learned to keep hidden from the people in her life. Even her own husband looked upon her story with skepticism. She and Thomas arranged to meet that very week. It was at this meeting that she related to Thomas an incident which had occurred when she was a teenager, some 14 years earlier. In the summer of 1972, Deborah had set out for a weekend camping trip with her parents and younger brother to a spot near Abraham Lake, off of Highway 11 near the Bighorn Dam, which had been completed that same year. They drove 40 miles beyond the dam and then followed a forestry road some 20 miles further. It was here that they found a spot to set up camp among trees and dense berry bushes. At this point, we will let Thomas reveal what more she had to share that day.
Okay, this first incident, known as Alberta file number 21. So this is rather early on in my investigation into the Sasquatch question career. I was contacted on the 25th of January of 1988 by Miss Deborah Malone, who saw an ad I had placed in the newspaper. Phoned to tell me something about she saw not too far from Abraham Lake, which was created when they built the Bighorn Dam in 1969, when she was a young girl of 13. She was a teenager at the time of the incident. The incident occurred in June of 1972. She agreed to be interviewed, and I went to her Northwest Calgary home the following night. Deborah, who is today, and remember I'm writing this in 1988, married with 2 children, seemed eager to tell about what had happened. Her husband, as it turned out, was an ex-soldier from my old regiment and battalion, the PBCLI. And he told me when he got me in private, I don't believe in any of this, but my wife has stuck to this story and swears that it did happen. So when I was talking to Miss Malone in private and recording the interview, my basic question at the time was, where did this incident occur? Her answer was near Nordegg, near a big lake. I believe it's called Abraham Lake. It was on a forestry road, I would say about 20 miles into the bush. And of course, she's guessing. I asked, north of Highway 11 or south? And she said, I think more west, which is rather odd since the highway runs east to west. But there are a few little curves there. What date did this take place? Near the end of June of 1972. Was it night or day? Day. What time of day? Oh, it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I asked her, well, describe the area for me in which it took place. It was fairly bushed. There weren't any real gigantic trees or anything around, smaller ones. A lot of low-lying shrub. There were a few tall trees, pines, fairly green, nice. Then I asked her what distance you think you were from the subject when you saw it. And you remember, in 1988, she's trying to remember something that she saw in 1972.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have thought about this time and time again. I would say I was not more than 50 to 55 feet away. What was your first reaction? Well, I was stunned. What was it doing? Answer, standing there. Question, did it stand walk on two legs? Answer, yes, it did. Question, did you ever see it go down on all fours? Answer, never. Question, was it covered in hair? Answer, yes. Question, what color was it? Answer, well, it was matted, brown, with some gray in spots, different shades of brown. Question, how tall would you estimate it to have been? Answer, over 7 feet. Question, how much would you estimate its weight to have been? Answer, I have no idea. It was big, heavy. Question, did you see any facial features? Answer, yes, I did. Eyes, nose. The eyes were most prominent. Could you describe them? Answer, the eyes were set fairly back in the head. I don't know. They were dark and very deep set. The nose was kind of jutted out a little bit and came down in kind of a slope. That's really the best impression I can give you. Could you describe anything about the arms? Very long, hung down almost to the knees. Were they very big? Answer, yep. This thing had gigantic shoulders. I would say at least 3 feet across. Tell if it was male or female. Answer, no, I couldn't. It didn't have any breasts or anything. I know that much. Question, how long do you think you saw this for? Answer, well, it seemed like an eternity. I would say I stood there and stared at this thing for maybe 7 to 10 minutes. Personally, I feel that's an overestimation, but that's what she said. Question, it stood there and stared at you? Answer, yep, it just stood there and stared right back at me. Question, did it ever make any noise? It made a low moan. It sounded like it was in the back of its throat. Question, what was its reaction when it saw you? Answer, I think it felt the same way I did. It was amazed I was there, and I was amazed it was there. We were both trying to figure each other out. That's my impression. Yeah. Question, so you were both standing there looking at each other? Answer, yes, exactly. Question, did you smell anything? She said, yeah, I did. It was musky. The closest thing I could tell you, it was smelled like a dog in heat. That's the only thing I can think of. Now, personally, I have no idea what a dog in heat smells like, but that's what she said. Question, after it moved off, did you check for footprints? Answer, no, I didn't. Question, do you report this to the RCMP? Question, do you report this to anyone else? Answer, just my brother. And then I asked the question, in your own words, describe why it happened. Just give me the general story. Back in those days, when I first started, I would ask that question after a lot of others, but now I usually start off the interview asking just a general description of the whole incident. Answer, well, we weren't doing anything that afternoon. My father and my mom and brother were setting up the camp. And I just decided to go off on my own little close by nature walk. I guess I strayed some distance from where I remember walking. I remember it really smelt nice out there. I came across some low-lying plants. There were berry plants. I bent down and started picking them. When I heard some, bushes rap. I turned around and I saw this creature standing there. It made this low noise in the back of its throat, and then I had an instant reaction. I just took off. I ran as fast and as far as I could. After I was away for a little while, I remember I was starting to get nauseous and I actually got sick. I was so scared I was sick. After being sick, I ran the rest of the way back to the campsite. Question, how old were you when this happened? Answer, 13.
Wow.
Question, were you on a camping trip with your family? Answer, yes. Question, and you wandered off on your own? Answer, yeah, I just wandered off doing my own little nature thing. Question, so you were the only one to see this thing? She said, yes, unfortunately. After the interview, Deborah gave me a small drawing that she made of the creature she saw. She told me that she drew the creature, that drew this picture soon after they came home from that camping trip. And I don't know if you can see it very well, but I got that right on the file right there.
Yeah, I got a picture that I'll put it up on this.
Just a little drawing she made as a 13-year-old girl when it happened. I got a marker out here. Update, March 1994. Just a note here. This is 1994, quite a few years after the initial interview. Just my interview with Deborah. Her story has been published in my first book, Sasquatch in Alberta. And now active interest in the subject has been trying to convince someone she knows who apparently had a sighting along the 940 trunk road to come forward and tell me about it. So she has a friend who also claims a sighting a little later. And at the time, she was trying to get her to tell me about it, but I never heard from that one.
You know, after I read the report, and I got to admit, I mean, she was only a kid, and what a terrifying thing to happen to a kid. And if I read it correct, she did not even know what a Sasquatch was.
No, she had no idea what she was looking at. Yeah. I remember there were a few things in the recording that I didn't write down, but her first impression was that she called it a great big ape.
Yeah.
She thought it was. Yeah, and it's not, they're not supposed to be there.
Well, logically, but I mean, to see that, and then she ran back to camp. She said what she saw, and nobody believed her.
Yeah,
nobody. Her family didn't believe her. They believed that she saw something, but not what she was.
Her younger brother was teasing her a little bit for the rest of the camping trip about their parents.
It's like seeing a Tyrannosaurus Rex run across the road in front of your car, and you think, I don't believe it. And who am I going to tell about it? Because they're certainly not going to believe it. So now you got to go around the rest of your life knowing that you saw a Tyrannosaurus Rex run across the road. Mm-hmm. And you can't even tell anybody about it. I mean, I know that's kind of ludicrous comparison, but I think it's the same thing to her. A 13-year-old meets a 7-foot ape, and nobody believes her. And she's got to carry that the rest of her life. I mean, other people go into therapy for years over a lot less than that.
Yeah, my impression is that Deborah, she was when I met her when she was in her 30s. Mm-hmm. In 1988, and I found her to be a quite, outspoken, intelligent young woman. Well, she had to be. She married a patrician.
Okay. Plug for the infantry. Yep. Okay.
And he was interesting too, because he told me, I don't believe in any of this. Was his exact. I don't believe in any of this Sasquatch stuff. But she has told me this story about 5 times since I met her and we started dating, and she's just stuck to it ever since. And I was the first researcher she ever contacted to actually tell about it. Of course, it's over almost 18 years after it actually happened. 1988. Yeah.
I'm sure to her it was like last month.
Yeah.
And like I said, seeing one of these things, it's not always a good thing. It's
Yeah,
not always something somebody celebrates, you know?
absolutely. And of course, it happened in an area that's basically in Alberta. It's their Harrison Lake area or their Willow Creek area in California, where most reports of the Sasquatch have come from.
You know what I like the most about it that wraps it up nice and neat to add to the validity of her claim is the sketch she made at the time, which is amazing as she had never even heard of Sasquatch until after that day. And yet here she is drawing a sketch of what is purported to be what a Sasquatch looks like.
Yeah. But of course, as a 13-year-old girl, trying to pinpoint exactly where this happened, like I'm looking at all the off roads, and I thought maybe they had gone up the 940 trunk road a little bit. But of course, as a 13-year-old girl, she wasn't paying any attention to that. She was probably just sitting in the back seat, looking at the pretty trees. You know, and she had no idea where they were. Really, she just knew it was in the Nordegg Abraham Lake area somewhere.
Well, I was surprised that she was aware enough to be able to say they turned off the highway and went 20 miles down a logging road about that before they set up camp. You know,
20 miles is almost far enough to say it's not in the Nordegg area. Because 20 miles is quite a distance. It's about almost it's quite a distance, and almost the distance between you and Chilliwack and me here in Michigan.
Yes, so quite a difference. Quite a difference.
Quite a distance. It may just seem like that to her. Who knows? Yeah.
You know, and the thing about it is that Deborah had no way of knowing that hers was not the first sighting in the same area, as you say. You know,
had no knowledge. She had no knowledge of the Sasquatch at the time this happened at all. She was a 13-year-old girl, for God's sake. All she was thinking about was boys and having fun, you know. Yeah.
Have you heard from her since 1994?
No, I have not.
No?
No,
so you have no idea whether she's picking up the torch or the baton, rather, and doing her own investigations or...
No, I don't believe she has because I've never heard from her in that sense.
Yeah.
And I don't remember her ever showing up to any of the lectures or conferences that we had in Alberta at the time.
I just find her report very interesting for a number of reasons. This is a sketch made by Deborah Malone on shortly after her encounter. And as you can see, she quite accurately depicts what could only be a Sasquatch in that sketch. So, what do you think?
This is a generally considered a classic tale. It is the classic tale of the province of Alberta as far as Sasquatch goes. That of the Crandall Campground incident, in my opinion. This one, the Bighorn Dam incident of August 23rd, 1969. It's when the dam was being constructed, and the dam was almost complete, and much of the flats had started to flood at this point, creating the man-made lake, Abraham Lake, which a lot of the local people at the time were against because a beautiful area known as the Kootenai Plains was basically being put underwater. Remember, this is 1969. We need more progress. We need more dams. We need more this. We need more of that, right? And Alberta, being Texas North, was probably in the lead in that area. Well, on this particular day, 5 workmen, August 23rd, 1969, 5 workmen Harley Peterson of Condor, Alberta, Stan Patterson, Floyd Engine of Eckville, Guy LaHurst, or LaRurks, not sure how to pronounce it, he was from Rocky Mountain House, and Dale Body. All 5 of these men were working at what would later become the pump house station below the dam, just downstream from it. This dam is being built in the North Saskatchewan River. When one of the men noticed this figure on the high riverbank, 100 or so yards away to their left, and this famous picture is one of the photographs I took at the time, showing the sighting location of where this happened, basically taken from where they were. Okay, that large overhead. And of course, I visited the site many times when I was in Alberta and photographed it many times in different weather conditions and different times of the year. And now other people are doing it now. Probably the last one I took just before I moved to British Columbia. That's me in the foreground. My last girlfriend took that photograph back in 2001. The Bighorn Dam site, very famous for Sasquatch. Now, these 5 men said they saw this figure walking along the top of that ridge, and they watched as it walked the entire length of the ridge, all the way from that end to that end. And then they watched it turn around and walk halfway back. When it got halfway back, it suddenly turned its back to them and walked off to those trees you just see over the bank. While all this was going on, and this took like about 15 or so minutes, one of the men, I think it was Floyd, went to get his manager to get one of those prospecting telescopes, with the tripod, to use to try and get a better look at it. But he got into a debate with the manager because the manager wanted to know why he wanted it. And he just said, never mind. And he went back. And what happened is 2 of the men eventually decided to go up where they saw the thing. And the men below were amazed that their companions were only half the height of the subject they were looking at. So they all estimated that what they were looking at was 15 feet tall.
That's quite tall.
Yeah, and there was quite a rash of incidents at the time in this area close to Nordegg between 1948 and 1984 of extremely tall height reports. That was one of the always things that fascinated me about the Sasquatch question in the province of Alberta. It's right around the Bighorn Dam, an 80-mile circle around Abraham Lake and Nordegg. There was a whole rash of incidents from 1948 and 1984 of extreme tall height reports. And what I mean by extreme, 11, 12, 13, and in this case, 15 feet tall. You had normal height reports, normal 6, 7, 8 feet tall at the same time. But for some reason, after 1984, the extreme height reports stopped, at least as far as I know, because I never heard of another one after 1984. However, normal height reports, 6, 7, 8 feet tall, have carried on. Yeah, the Bighorn Dam sightings, I'm reading from my file report on it, started making headlines in 1968. There was a rash of incidents before this, when members of the Blackfoot Indian Band, or First Nation Band, as we call it then, remember, I'm writing this when they started, reported large footprints in the creek bed, which were photographed. Most were prints taken at Windy Point. Of the same year, several people reported seeing a large hairy creature that walked upright. Then on August 23rd, 1969, 5 men working on the construction site for the Bighorn Dam on the North Saskatchewan River saw something at the top of the high river bank about 2,000 meters away. Harley Patterson of Condor, Alberta was the first to notice the large upright figure watching them from the high ridge. And his quote, he was quoted at the press at the time as saying, "It looked like a large man." It stood there for about half an hour, then walked along the ridge of the high riverbank, and finally came back and then turned and walked away and disappeared in the trees. Now, while the creature was watching the men below, one of them tried waving, but the figure did not react. Unfortunately, none of the men had a camera or a pair of binoculars. However, they were able to come to a rough idea of its size of the subject when two of the men hiked up to the spot where it had been observed. While the others watched from below, they were astonished to see that their companions were only about 1/3 the height in comparison. These are all men, 5'11", one of them was 6 foot. The view of the workers all described the creature that they had seen must have stood at least 15 feet tall, 3 times the height of the average man.
Wow.
And that's what they said at the time.
I read the report, and it seemed like some factions of the time said that it was just a hoax perpetrated by the local Indians. And the Indians said it was a hoax perpetrated by the dam builders. And some people said, it was just a flat out lie. Some of
the First Nations at the time were against the construction of their dam because they did not want to see a huge portion of the Kootenai Plains flooded and turned into a lake. Others were all for, and matter of fact, 2/3 of the work crew were First Nation men from the local area.
There's one thing that applies here that applied to us, same to a lot of other places in Ontario and everything, is that when the government decides they're going to build a dam, they don't exactly give people much notification whose property is going to be affected. Now, Abraham, as well as a bunch of other big dams, big man-made lakes across the country, yes, at the bottom of them are many hunting trails and winter hunting cabins and what have you belonging to the local indigenous people that's now under 50 feet of water. The government has even been known to inadvertently kill a number of indigenous people flooding the land, because there's one, I forget where it happened, but there's one famous case of it is where all the men went away winter hunting and the women and the children stayed behind in the lowlands, and the government flooded the area when they constructed a dam. The males came back at the end of the hunting season, and they couldn't find any of their families. All of their territory was underwater. Nobody even notified them that it was going to happen. So I can understand if the Indians want to pull a fast one, you know.
And of course, there's a lot of interest in the press at the time, because you can see these photographs and a witness drawing of what they saw. In the Alberta press at the time, that's Floyd standing there on top of the pipe that was going to be, and describing how tall it was, you know, at the time. And not all the press took the story seriously, because this famous comic showed up in the Edmonton Journal. Dr. Sasquatch talking to a Sasquatch on a stone. Man, tell me more about these little cloth-colored creatures you've been seeing.
I remember that.
And it got enough coverage at the time. It got well known at the time that the late, my late friends and colleagues, the late John Green, the late Rennie DeHinden, personally went out there to look into matters. As a matter of fact, Renee took a job so he could stay in the area for a while, and he stayed in that area and didn't leave until the Bosberg cripple incidents happened later on that same year down in Washington.
Wow, that's fascinating, fascinating. And as you say, for a number of years, that area, from what I gather, has been known as around the dam and around Abraham Lake, and that is known for being a bit of a hot spot for
Oh yeah.
finding of footprints, sightings, and a good many of them were by the native people,
Mhm.
and yeah, and there was others that were sort of very secretive about what they saw and what they found and everything.
Also, on March of 1994, I put an update on this file.
Yeah,
Information has now come my way by word of mouth that the Indian people in this region have a large Sasquatch costume used for ceremonial purpose.
really.
Now, we know First Nations in that area at the time were against the dam's construction. Also made another update in January 1997. Have in the last 2 years been unable to confirm the existence of this costume, but I have heard about it in way of mouth. It involves using stilts, and whoever wears this suit can't walk very well.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
Mm.
That casts a little bit of doubt on. I mean, you had to remember, I guess, is that these five guys working on the pump house, they were quite some distance away from that ridge.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I have never been there, so I don't know. But I'm imagine we're looking at a little figure in their eyes about the height of a matchstick on the table in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they could tell too much about the creature's gait and how it walked and everything else at that distance. So
And that area in Alberta, that area is some of the most beautiful rocky mountain country you have ever seen.
mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm.
is, to put it quite simply, magnificent.
I would accept it has nothing to do with Sasquatch. I'd like to do something with Abraham's Lake itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a big attraction there, folks. Believe it or not, because of the everything underground, all the vegetation and everything they flooded, it excretes a lot of, believe it or not, a lot of gas, and the gas forms methane. The gas forms bubbles as it rises in the water. So you go on the net and you put in Lake Abraham, Alberta, and you see the pictures. It looks like masses of jellyfish under the surface of the lake, and these are methane gas bubbles coming to the surface.
Yeah.
They say there's even some sections where you can start a fire just by throwing a match in an area where these bubbles are on the shoreline or whatever, and yeah, I mean, it's quite stunning. It's an unbelievable sight. But then,
And like I
Alberta.
said, there was a whole rash of extremely tall height reports at this time, and of course, this isn't was the biggest one. One update on May 1974, Mr. Ronald C. Gamel was driving along Highway 11 near the Bighorn Dam site when he came upon two very large, hairy creatures standing on the road. He stopped his car, and the two stood there and watched him for a few seconds, then moved off into the bush. Later, Mr. Gamal estimated that both creatures stood 13 feet tall.
They grow them big in Alberta for some reason. It's not to see over trees because,
like I said, yeah. As far as I know, as of 1984, the extreme height reports in this area stopped.
For some strange reason. Yeah, well, the dam was completed.
Just a small population of extremely tall creatures lived out their lives and passed on or moved on, and they're gone. Whereas other creatures are carrying on. Simple as that.
Do you think flooding the land had that far-reaching effect for animals and other creatures to have to readapt to different hunting areas or different? I know on a small scale where the lake is itself, yeah, but I'm just wondering from what you said whether or not these creatures, if they exist, just decided to move on. because of that lake being there.
Could very well be. I mean, the area is so densely forested in the Rocky Mountains. Like these are some pictures I took there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that area, known as the Kootenai Plains, is an area of grassland with just little patches of trees in it.
Okay.
So that's why it was so popular in both banks of the North Saskatchewan River. And that's mainly the area that got flooded. There's still parts of the plains still there. The lake didn't cover it all, but it covered a huge portion of it.
Yeah.
At the time.
That's
of course,
another.
This is 1969, and environmental impact studies weren't nearly as thorough as they do today for such projects.
Oh, yeah, and I think they give the indigenous people a bit more of a heads up before they start flooding places too. You know?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the Bighorn Dam is an earth dam. It's not concrete.
I never knew that.
Basically, an earthen dam. Yeah, it's not. I don't know what its purpose is, quite frankly. I'm not sure if it's meant to generate electricity, but it's mostly an earthen dam.
I think it's
went
hydro.
back there. Yeah, I went back there in August of this year, and it was my first time back to that part of Alberta in 20 years. And I couldn't get to the dam site because they were having some problems with the spillway, so the area was closed off. Because I really wanted to visit that site again. So we ended up having our Alberta get together just down the road from there. And the area is still gorgeous. The lake is still there. And there are still Sasquatch seen, but they're not the extreme height reports anymore.
That's a very very interesting area, and very interesting subject. Anyway, much more of these programs to come, folks. So tune in. We're going to be here, and we're going to be going through Thomas's files, and we're going to be picking out his greatest hits kind of thing, and we're going to go in and delve into them a bit more deeply than is usually covered. And Thomas, I want to thank you very much for your expertise and your time and your good nature for going along with this. And drop back, folks. We'll have many, many more in the future.
Thank you, Jerry. Enjoyed it.
Okay, dear listener, that about wraps it up for now. My name is Jerry Matthews. You can reach me at yellowcoyote@telus.net. Thank you for your interest, and until the next time, keep searching.